All right, people, we are live with a Valentine's Day special. It's not really a Valentine's Day special, it's just Valentine's Day. And I've worn my finest Simon's shirt. What I love about this one is the different texture for the inside of the cuffs. Really makes you feel like you're wearing two different shirts. Okay, it's going to be another good stream tonight. I did a poll in the community tab yesterday to see whether or not I should go live, given that it's Valentine's Day, and I said my wife said she really doesn't care. I was expecting it to be 99% yes, go live. It was like 65% go live, 35% don't, because it's a trap. And when your wife says she doesn't care, she cares. And there were like, I don't know, there was, I think 10,000. There were a lot of people voting. Let me just see how many there were. But I tell you something. How many? There were 9.3 thousand votes. And it was 34% who said don't go live. My wife really doesn't care. We're still on curfew in Quebec. So what are we going to do anyhow? Plus, Valentine's Day, manufactured holidays, anniversaries, weddings, birthdays. Yeah. Anyway, so we're going live. It's going to be a good one too. Let me just bring up the first super chat for the first intro warning caveat. You have mentioned you didn't fully understand free speech in the USA. Now you do. What was your original idea of what you thought it was? Pretty much the same as Canada. Jonathan? Yes. I took for granted that we have freedom of speech in Canada, which we do with a but. And I took for granted that the freedom of speech in Canada was not much different than freedom of speech in the US. Yeah. This whole channel has been an amazing learning curve and wonderful. I swear to you, first of all, I think I could pass the US bar, and I think I might try to do it just, for content. And because what did I just do here on the stream? I just brought something up there and I couldn't see everything. It's been a massive learning curve, and I appreciate how religiously defended freedom of speech is in the United States. It's a wonderful thing, because you see when the government starts cracking down on freedom of speech, it is a slippery slope to nowhere good. Now let me just go bring up another super chat, and then I'm going to give the standard warning. Brendan Sullivan says, my girlfriend said it was fine to watch Viva and Barnes. I imagine I'm sleeping at the doghouse tonight in the show. No, in fact, you should be watching with your girlfriend and make it a wonderful Valentine's Day date night. So first things first, super chats, thank you in advance. Robert and I split them 50-50 on these streams. YouTube takes 30%, and if that bothers everybody, I totally understand. If you want to support the channel, there are other ways to do it, through our locals community, through just sharing the content. I have a Patreon and a Subscribe Star, which I only opened because people were insisting. I don't really like those things. It's more of I don't really like those anyhow, but they're there. But locals, share the videos. You can watch my second channel, Viva Family, where I put up what I used to put up only on this channel before it became totally law. All that to say, thank you in advance for the super chats. I don't get to them all. If it's going to miff you if I don't give the super chat. I don't like people feeling miffed. Second thing, none of this is legal advice. So don't walk away thinking you can now go do something because Viva or Barnes said it. Don't do anything without seeing a lawyer in your jurisdiction who can understand the facts, understand the jurisdiction, understand the law, and apply all of it to give you proper advice in the context of a mandate. Don't trust free advice. Don't trust internet advice. And nothing in here is advice anyhow. Purely for educational purposes. What else? Let me see what we got here. Triumph. Hold on. Someone said they're miffed, and you didn't even give John. Come on. No, Eric. So I'm going to talk about this in 2 seconds. I just want to bring up one more Triumph while we have some time here. Eric Hunley's channel is gone, deleted midstream this morning. So this I'm talking about right now, and I've been tweeting it out. I have no doubt it's an algorithmic glitch. Call it it's a screw up. It's nothing shy of a screw up. I know, because I've seen it before in different circumstances where you're doing a live stream and you get a warning during your live stream, and these warnings typically come by YouTube notifications in studio, which nobody sees. Then they arrive by email. And what happened is, stream went down. I thought it just got cut. It was a stream on a certain type of digital money, and they were offering rewards as, a perk. And those could have been two big problems already, because those might flag certain warning signs within YouTube that, there might be a scam going on, whatever. And in the introduction of the stream, Eric had used certain terms which, in certain contexts are aggressive terms, but are analogies when talking about other stuff. So a number of things might have come together to trigger some warning. But what ends up happening is he gets a warning during the stream, and within the same minute, because you got the email for the warning, something in your stream is no good, promoting dangerous or harmful activities. He gets the takedown on the stream email, and then the termination of the channel in the same minute. 3 emails back to back to back within the same minute. And channel deleted. He was at 15,000 subs. This was his project that he had been working on for years. AI algorithm deleted in an instant, as though there's no human behind all of this who's distraught, to say the least. I know people think YouTube channels are like for little kids who want to make silly videos. For other people, and I include myself in this. And this is not confession through projection. This is just stating the obvious. They are creations that give you an outlet to share your thoughts, to do good in the world. They are life projects. For some, they are passive income. For some, they're primary income. They're not just little buttons on a board you flick off, and you can have a little machine doing it, and there's nobody behind that button. There's a universe behind that button. So Eric is distraught. I'm convinced that YouTube will recognize that this was a glitch, because it played like a glitch. It doesn't make sense. Eric Hunley, I'm not just coming to his defense because he's my friend. It's like, very rarely do you know enough of someone's content that you feel comfortable saying, I know it's been on Eric's channel, but I also know how this happened. This came straight from today's live stream, where it was taken down. The stream itself said it was removed for violating YouTube's terms of service. And then within the minute, the whole channel was terminated. So he's filed the appeal. Within 30 minutes, someone obviously reviewed the appeal and said, no, we're maintaining our suspension when it was a termination. Anyways, he's in touch with them on Twitter, with Team YouTube. He's going to go after, send emails and get their attention and make sure they don't just forget about him, because it's an obvious mistake. But anybody else who wants to help, tweet it out to Team YouTube. It's an obvious mistake. And he's a good guy. And the content it's not content that even the stream, there was nothing harmful or dangerous in it. It's obvious. He might have used words to describe something that could be picked up by an algorithm as being bad words, but it's anybody who knows that he's a good guy. He does good work and doesn't deserve this. So that's my 7-minute intro on Eric. So he's been tweeting it to Team YouTube. Tweet it, share it, raise awareness. I mean, it's there are bigger problems in the world, true. But this is someone's problem right now. Okay, what do we got? Mrs. Viva is a true gem. Hold on to her. 13 years. We are 13 years. 13 years. 14? Might be 14. Love even Barnes. Keep it up, Dave. Cold in our fair city tonight. Freezing. It's better today than it was yesterday. I went fishing on my second channel. If you want to go there, I caught a fish. I swear to you, it was this big. I don't know how the fish got the hook in its mouth. Why not include your wife in today's live stream? Let me just go see if she wants to come down and say hi, because Robert's not here yet anyhow. People might want a cameo, smiley face. Now Siri knows. So we'll see if she comes down. Thank you. So what do we have on for the menu tonight? Live free or die. Live free or fry. That's not a bad shirt right there. And Cleopatra's in the house. I saw the icon. I'm curious to see. There's also going to be a lot of noise upstairs. Oh, another thing. You might see a third dog in my studio tonight. We're dog sitting. We didn't get a third dog. I can't do another dog. I'm curious to see your thoughts you and Robert have on the lawsuits the U.S. government filed against SpaceX for their hiring practices. We're going to see. While I don't agree with everything you both say, I respect your positions and appreciate your perspective you bring. Thank you very much, Ari. Now, hold on. I saw Cleopatra. There it is. I got to scroll down. Here we go. Cleopatra. Oh my God, I didn't realize they canceled Eric's channel. This is crazy. Eric Hunley, one of the kindest, best moderators on YouTube. Eric, if you are watching, we will follow you wherever you are. Eric has a locals page. He's on Rumble. But, he had hit 15,000 on YouTube, and YouTube, everyone says go to BitChute, by the way, which is another one. But people have to appreciate BitChute is good for people if you want to watch videos. It's not sustainable for a creator, because creators have to be able to monetize their content if they want to keep doing it without having to sell shirts, without having to ask for community support. And it's like, BitChute's good. It's good for backup. Rumble is the place where you can monetize. It's just a smaller platform for the time being. Okay, that's what we got here. If you want somebody to publicly implode, encourage them to run for president. Okay, interesting. And we got 63 Rambler. We know what a Karen is, but modeled by a... Okay, I'm trying not to read things that are going to get me in trouble here. The other things, you don't even know. Nobody knows. Eric... Nobody knows. Viva, is it true Canada has invited in some 10,000s of CCP soldiers into the country? I've read articles. I don't know. There's certain things. I'm not a journalist in that I'm not going to report things that are not thoroughly vetted by other people. I'm not in a position to do it. I know I've seen this email being circulated. It's been forwarded to me a dozen times. Rebel News does the good work. If anybody wants to go learn some of the stuff about that, but I follow Rebel News because they cover stories that other news just doesn't cover. I can't read this. Okay. My beloved dog, Sweetie, went blind before she died. Diabetes. She got along just fine without sight. Winston's doing great, by the way. His sense of smell is good. He's just not yet house trained. There's a lot of running going on upstairs. He's not yet house trained, and it's too cold in any event. Let me just make sure that Robert has all the links here. We've got some good stuff tonight. So you got links. We're live. Yeah, I put out an update that I said I wasn't going to put out a video on the impeachment because I just couldn't stomach it. I put out a video before I published the video. It was no longer relevant. I guess it was still relevant, but it was no longer up to date because they acquitted. They had called witnesses. I want to talk to Robert about it because I want to talk to Robert because I have questions, but I put out a video 2 hours later. The impeachment was over after I said they had just said they were going to call witnesses. It's going to last another 2 days. Have you thought about going to Odyssey? There are too many platforms right now. I mean, I'm focusing on locals and I'm focusing on Rumble and I'm focusing on YouTube. There's Utreon, there's BitChute, there's Minds, there's too many. You have to pick some and focus it. Otherwise you just confuse everybody with too many links. Self-censoring, this is the world we're in now. The love-hate with YouTube grows in one direction daily. It's no question. It's self-censorship. I wouldn't say certain things even if there weren't rules. I always self-censor to some extent because I'm not just swearing and calling people names. That's the form of self-censorship. The idea of not knowing what it is that you can and cannot talk about is bad. The idea that you make one silly... and I would say silly in the sense that it's going to be weaponized by people who don't like you. Instagram post and you get fired. You lose millions of dollars. Everyone's going to get tired of this. I mean, eventually people get tired of fighting. It's just a question of when. All right. Oh yeah, that was good. Robert is in the house. Let me just see if I can do one more here. Does Carano have a Title VII? Okay, well, sex discrimination case versus her employer since Pascal did the same thing. We're going to talk about that. Let's bring Robert in. And yet, Rebel News, by the way, they get called a lot of names. They have certain tweets that may rub people the wrong way. They are covering stories that that Canadian news is not covering, and they're doing, love them or hate them, they're doing work that people need. They're fighting tickets that people are getting. They're defending people who are not getting coverage in the ordinary press, and people who ordinarily would get not just coverage, would get public support. But for the fact that nobody's reporting on it, so very few people know about it. So go check out Ezra Levant, Keen Bexty, Sheila Gunn Reid, Rebel News. I wonder if those words are going to get me in trouble. With that said, bring on the Barnes. Robert, how you doing?
Good.
Okay, this is, I went over the Eric Hunley, so we don't need to do it again. But I'm thinking, as an intro to tonight, setting aside Eric Hunley, when is there going to be a justifiable lawsuit for breach of contract with YouTube? If YouTube has terms of service that says, if you do something naughty, we will give you a warning. Then we'll escalate, and then we'll do this. When do you have a legitimate lawsuit for breach of their terms of their own contract when within instantaneously you have all three gradations of sanctions and they actually don't respect their own contractual obligations for notifications, strikes, warnings before termination?
I mean, right now, the practical reality is the courts are closed to almost any suit against any of the big tech. So until there's legislative reform, or unless the Supreme Court somehow gets involved, there's very little remedy available to you for anything that relates to your channel. Now, there might be other suits that we'll be talking about that can be brought because big tech is getting big for its britches in a wide range of spaces where they probably exceeded it. In fact, I may even talk to Cassandra about maybe being a plaintiff in such a claim. But right now all the other ones are tough, and they've suffered zero consequence, zero blowback for all of their censorship efforts. It's clearly that the scale and scope of it is just going to continue to grow. I was on Tulsi Gabbard's Locals channel, saying that one of the keys to any future political reform in the country, social reform in the country, is probably going to be a divorce from social media over time. That those of us that are content creators no longer feeding the beast down the road. I think that they're forcing us into that position, that the only way we can leverage our influence is to leave these platforms over time. I think that's it. Because unfortunately, I mean, I think the antitrust actions will have remedy, but it'll be 3, 4, 5 years away. So it's unfortunate, but the fact that a channel like Herrick's channel, well, I mean, it's wrong is what it is. It's just waiting for the courts to come to remedy, sort of like Trump in the elections. You'll be waiting a while.
No, it's wrong. It's clearly, the other problem is, as far as I'm concerned, it's clearly just a mistake. But who do you call? And the biggest problem is, once they terminate his channel, he can't even get on YouTube chat to get on with chat to have them resolve it. It's vaporized. I mean, they can bring it back, and I suspect they will. And it's not like it's been memory hold in the Orwellian sense. They can bring it back, but it's just he can't even get on chat anymore to discuss with I don't even know if they're real people or bots on chat. So he's got to fill out the form, send it. It's just it's consequence.
It's insane. I mean, it's a complete. It's clearly. I mean, it's not consistent with what they promised. It's none of those things. And if we had a court system that wasn't corrupted on this issue, then we would get relief and remedy. Now, where we are seeing potential relief and remedy is at the state legislative level. So, I mean, the governor in Florida has stepped to the plate and passed a bunch of laws to allow for remedy. And so maybe that will be, and then of course, some foreign governments are doing the same. So that may be where you can seek remedy in the near short term until something happens at a national level in the United States, or until there's a reversal of mindset in the courts. But I think, I mean, what a lot of us have been warning about, for some time, I took a lot of heat for representing this guy, and consequently, and I kept telling everybody this is coming for everybody, and had conversations with certain people this weekend about this that seemed shocked that was happening to them. It's like this is about gatekeeper institutional control. It's neo-fascism. It's the integration of big tech, big corporations, and the state, and it's going to continue to expand. And when they can take out the nice little guys like Eric Hunley, when they can go after famous names like Robert Kennedy, why aren't they going to go after everybody? Everybody's going to have to shut up and stay silent and stay on page. And if you don't, they're gonna memory hole you like they tried to do to Alex Jones. So we're all going to be Alex Jones soon.
The funny thing was when I put out a highlight, and it was a joke where you said something, I forget what it was, but it was a burn, and then I put in the sort of the burn and you sipped from your cup, and I was like, oh geez, I didn't know what the logo was on the cup when I did it, and I published. I was like, oh crap, I should have checked. Now I know what it is, and it's really not the end of the world, except in a bizarro world. But no, I mean it's the one remedy I can see at the very least now, until there's a decision on the merits, is you can sue them for defamation in Canada. Now we have a precedent that says you can take these big tech companies to court for defamation and for potentially other violations without having to go to sue in a place where it's not going to recognize any rights. So maybe that's going to be, go international, like you said in previous vlogs.
And I think, this, I guess, could be a brief transition, or maybe we'll do it later with Robert Kennedy. But I think they have gone far afield of their contractual terms. They're thinking that now they're not just gatekeepers, but they can start becoming mass libelers, mass defamers. And that's where I think there's a different, they don't have the same protection there, and they don't realize that quite yet. I was researching it this weekend. for a particular reason. I found no cases that said Section 230 immunized them from just going out and libeling people like anyone else. And they're using the fact that you use their platform as their pretext to libel you, but that doesn't make their contract binding in any respect as it relates to the libel, as to where such a suit can be brought, as to the terms of such a suit, as to any limitations on such a suit, on whether it has to be arbitration or in court. I don't think they've processed this yet because it appears, to my surprise somewhat, nobody has yet really sued them for them using their denial of access of services as defamation in this context, especially when they're accelerating it. I mean, the test case in that context was Alex Jones, but the new test case even there they stayed vague for the most part. They're accelerating because they used their leverage to go after Robert Kennedy for a massive libel campaign. And I don't think they understand that they're not as immune as they think they are in that area. So that's a space I think where there may be some legal remedy coming. And that's why I may bring the claim on Cassandra's behalf on a related case if she's game for it. And we would test it in Florida, test some of those new laws in Florida. So I think we may have some fun coming down the pipeline.
And you know what? We'll start with RFK. I'll just read this chat because I think it's on point, and then it'll bring us in. I think that folks will begin to walk another path. Like Lincoln said, you can fool some of the people all the time, some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all the time. People get wise. People see it, and there's other platforms now that are, good for the creators and not just for finding videos. And Rumble happens to be still small.
People can find Eric Hunley on Rumble. It'd be great to see Eric get over 15,000 followers on Rumble. So make YouTube kind of irrelevant. A very annoying thing that they did to him, but leverage it to become get more attention. Why is this little guy so significant to YouTube that they felt the need to wipe him out without any kind of notice and gave any kind of real basis?
No. The basis is it's just a mechanical error. Dangerous or harmful content on a stream about digital money. It's obvious. It's just like some words and whatever. It's a broken system. I told Eric, my feeling is it's going to come back. He's going to have a net positive on YouTube, and he's going to have a net positive everywhere. But either way, Eric Hunley is on Locals. He's on Rumble. So that's that. Okay, RFK. I don't think I know a lot of the details. I know they wiped him from Twitter. I don't know
not Twitter, Instagram.
So they wiped him from Instagram on what basis?
So basically, they used it as the real pretext. The removing him from Instagram was one thing, even though he had close to 1 million followers. The greater offense was they used the fact that he used Instagram as an excuse to libel him to the entire world. So they said that he put out false facts concerning COVID vaccines. He was citing the CDC. He was citing the vaccine reporting committee. I mean, there's this process whereby we gather any vaccine injury, and it's publicly accessible information. Alex Berenson has been covering this in extensive detail. So he was referencing that. He was going to be doing a live stream that involved medical professionals, others that are experts in the field concerning what the potential risks are. And what they said is they just completely removed him. But that would have been one thing. They didn't, but they used the fact of their removal to create a news story where they could libel him. And they put out a statement to the New York Times, to the Associated Press, to the USA Today, saying we have had to remove Robert Kennedy because Robert Kennedy is spreading lies about COVID vaccines. And it's completely false that they didn't cite. Not only that, they took it really a step further. And this is what I want people to start looking at as a template. One reason why I may bring the case if Cassandra's game, because Cassandra got partially hit on a similar thing back not that long ago for sharing a Robert Kennedy link concerning COVID vaccines risks, is that the other issue here is, in my view, Facebook engages in 3 levels of defamation and libel. One, it's whatever, when they say that they are doing anything to you because you spread false information, that's a factual claim. That's not an opinion. That's a factual claim. But they do more than that. In Robert Kennedy's case, they referenced the media back, the component of it, as to Cassandra's question, Robert Kennedy will likely go with a liberal lawyer because of the politics of the situation. And that's why I'll probably bring, and that's why I'm looking for a different, to bring the case on behalf of someone else, but the same legal theory to show everyone how it can be done. The second component is they cite people back to their policy page, where they claim that if they take any action like this, that they have already reviewed the matter with public health experts and reviewed the matter with third-party fact checkers, and that both of them will have confirmed that the information you were giving out was factually false and had been completely debunked before they take this action. So now, anytime Facebook, in my view, this is going to be my interpretation moving forward, given Facebook has made these statements, whenever they suspend anybody on these grounds, my view is they're telling people three things factually. One is that they're saying you spread factually false information, but also they're saying our third-party fact checkers independently reviewed it and said you were doing false information. And third, our public health experts reviewed it and said you were spreading false information. And in Robert Kennedy's case, I have good reason to believe they did none of that. They didn't have a third-party fact checker review his work, any statements he made. They didn't have any public health experts review his work on any statements he made, because they would have come back and told him there's no grounds to do this because he's citing government's data. He's citing the government's own record keeping on this.
It's mind-blowing because it goes back to actually, for anybody who doesn't know, I was on the Rubin Report with Dr. Drew and Dr. Zubian. I'm not gonna remember Zubian Daman, Z-Dog MD on YouTube, and Dr. Drew, and Dr. Z-Dog to a lesser degree, I think, but they've been getting streams shut down, content censored on YouTube, and they're medical professionals. Now, Robert F. Kennedy I don't think he's a doctor. I just know that he's been highly involved in the area for decades. But you have big tech now, seemingly unilaterally, seemingly without any control, without any accountability, without any oversight, dictating what medical information the general public on the largest search engines, the largest Instagram, whatever, have access to. And when we did the stream, was it on, who'd we do it with? We did a stream, I don't know who saw it, but it was with Eugene Volokh, who's a constitutional rights professor in California. And where I said, they're like the government. And Eugene said, no, they're not like the government. Don't exaggerate. And a little bit later, I said, they're actually more powerful than the government, because at the very least, government has checks and balances, whereas these private companies don't. And right now they're dictating and guiding conversations, sanctioning individuals on fields in which other people might very well not just have legitimate point of views, arguable point of views, but in some cases with Dr. Drew, probably more informed points of views. And I think that's more dangerous than anything, is that big tech is playing big doctor.
Well, what makes it more egregious in this case is they're lying to everyone about what they're doing, because they're lying about other people, because they're claiming that the only people they suspend for misinformation are people that third-party fact checkers and public health experts have agreed that the claim is factually false. So they're claiming there's no medical basis for anything Robert Kennedy said, based on an independent third-party expert review and a third-party fact checker review. Those reviews aren't really happening in most of these cases. In a few cases that they are happening, they're not third parties, and they're not coming to that conclusion. So it's 3 levels of libel. It's the libel of saying, hey, this person spread misinformation. That's the first false statement, when they didn't spread any misinformation. Second, it's a libel by saying your third-party fact checkers confirmed this when they didn't. And third, it's a libel when you're saying that the public health experts reviewed it and determined it when they didn't. So in Robert Kennedy's case, they just summarily dismissed it. Now, summarily removed his account, almost 1 million followers. Secondly, lied to him in the world, and the newspapers ran with it. Almost every newspaper and media outlet ran with the story of, oh, look, basically implying third-party fact checkers, public health experts, independently reviewed what Robert Kennedy was saying, and everything he's been saying about COVID vaccines is not true, when he was citing the government's own data. That's what he was talking about. Well, and he's always very, very careful, for reasons that belabor the obvious. He's always known they would try to sue him into oblivion if he ever got anything wrong. So what's interesting is, in this particular context, he's chosen deliberately to limit his sources to the same sources that Facebook says is authoritative.
Well, no, it's even
peer-reviewed studies, doctors, and the sources that YouGov says. That Facebook says is okay. So it is the biggest libel of a high-profile public figure by big tech in history at this point. And I'm quite sure that Robert Kennedy will be bringing legal action. And I may bring a parallel action on behalf of someone else to show everyone else how to do it, because this is a whole new space they're trying to do. Not just gatekeep information anymore. They now want to be able to leverage their power to libel you and destroy your reputation around the world.
I know, and Funky Cold Medina says they're third-party fact checkers. That's a load of crap. It's not. This we touched on in
Candace Owens case.
Candace Owens suing Facebook. Yeah, sorry, I'm blanking out on names. Where she sued them and she's alleging a bunch of problems, but not the least of which is these third-party fact checkers is what I was.
There are no third-party fact checkers involved.
No, the third-party fact checkers have agreements with Facebook. They're partners, not third parties, and they, as we've seen in Candace's lawsuit, in fact stand to benefit from their fact checking by driving traffic from the fact checked to the fact checker, thus increasing their ad revenue, their traffic at the expense of the fact check, in this case Candace Owens. I said, if there's any parasitism that's recognized in U.S. law, this is it. This is sucking the life from the host to feed the parasite at the expense of the host. But it's an amazing thing. I said it as a joke when they took down one of my videos about Voldemort, his deposition, and said it violated YouTube's terms of services for hate speech. I said that's defamatory because that suggests something about me that is factually incorrect and subsequently reinstated. But it's the way to go.
Exactly, and I don't think they've thought this through. I haven't found any cases that have said that Section 230 doesn't apply to this. Their terms of agreements, their contracts don't apply to this. Their venue choice does not apply to this. Their demanding arbitration doesn't apply to this. This is because this is them just libeling as if I had no relationship with them whatsoever, as if anyone else didn't have so that when I am libeled by Facebook, I can sue them like anybody else. The fact they may have an account on Facebook has nothing to do with that suit. They're just using it as a pretext to libel. And here, the Associated Press took it even further. They took it to what Facebook was really saying. They spelled it out, but they said Robert Kennedy has been suggesting that there's possible dangers. There might be a possible danger with the COVID vaccine. And then the AP said, there's been studies, tens of thousands of people, and there's no serious side effect risk at all. And it's like, that's not what those studies said. Those studies said the risk was low. It didn't say there was no risk. Otherwise, even the government admits over 650 people have died from the vaccine. Their argument is that's out of 44,000 people, so that's worth the risk-reward ratio. That's a policy argument. But pretending that there's no adverse consequences to this, why did they need immunity from liability then? If there was no consequences. Bill Gates was demanding that up front, dear Bill Gates. So I think, and they didn't like, the other thing he did is he has been accelerating his criticism of Bill Gates and drawing some dots together. People can go to look up his page, look up the Defender, the Children's Health Defense, and he just puts he just draws the lines between the dots that already exist about dear Bill, and so that are very useful. But obviously Bill doesn't like that, and has a lot of allies in big tech, and the system wants to suppress anybody questioning anything. In fact, Facebook put out a statement that they wouldn't even allow you to argue about whether or not COVID could be man-made or come from a Chinese lab, which was a really odd statement because even the Biden administration has questions about that. Is Facebook going to suspend the Biden administration? It's insane.
Well, it takes a big lawsuit. It takes a big defeat, but those things take time. And the question is what happens in the interim. They're driving traffic to alternate sites, which they then subsequently shut down or use the almighty, threats of whatever to go after.
It's the best way to stay one step ahead from the censors and the suppressors is, and I think there's other reasons to get divorced from big tech, especially Facebook and Twitter. They're so manipulative what they go into social dilemma. The psychological damage they've done to an entire generation of people is horrendous when you really dig into the data. So I think that, that's why we created Viva, barneslaw.locals.com and other places like it so that you can, the escape routes are being built. We'll stay inside the temple as long as we're allowed to, but the escape paths are there, so people should start building their backup plans now.
And just so people complain that there's an aspect of Locals that's behind a paywall. Yes, that's where you get exclusive content. Robert is much more active with the exclusive content on Locals. All of our stuff is still on Rumble and YouTube, so you can still watch it. And it's still, my stuff is backed up on BitChute. I think someone automatically does it. I don't know who, but thank you. So
it's interesting about Rumble. It must have authentic. It's like old YouTube. So like I backed up my just a few things that I have on a small YouTube channel onto Rumble, and all of a sudden I get that it was like 20,000 views on just one of my little. I was like, what happened? It was the natural searches popped up my video as being content driven that YouTube, of course, won't allow anymore.
It is amazing.
Fascinating to witness what the world used to be like in live time.
It is amazing. And now it might be skewed in that a lot of the new audience is definitely more right of center than left of center, and they're looking up certain things. But that's what happens when it responds to the actual community intent.
But here you have sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, David Nuxton Albright says there's sort of a Talmudic principle. In the Talmud, all arguments are given why. We know the resolution. Why attention to other points of view? The answer, because you can't understand your own argument if you don't understand those who disagree with you.
Yeah, exactly. What I always like to say, if you want to improve your reasoning, change your motivation, because motivation tends to be the master of reasoning. But that doesn't mean you can't improve your reasoning by shifting motivation. But going after the famous son of the most famous political family, really in American history, in the Kennedy family. And I know different people have different decisions and different interpretations and opinions about that. It's about the Kennedys, that they provoke both love and hate. But it's clearly on the left, and to go after him just because he's publishing government data, which means they're coming for Alex Berenson soon, because Berenson has been much more aggressive than Bobby Kennedy has been. Bobby Kennedy just raises, like, he's labeled anti-vax. He's never been anti-vax. He believes in the informed consent, and he thinks it's a problem. What the interesting thing is how he came into this to a large degree, because he's been a long-time environmental activist, but more on the populist side of environmentalism. In other words, protecting local communities against big corporations polluting in your backyard, protecting native tribes all around the world from big oil companies and big lumber companies and big chemical companies destroying their physical landscape and their livelihoods. And if you watch a movie, first book and movie reference, A Civil Action, great film. He's been doing those kind of cases for decades and managed to win them at an extraordinary rate. So he helped to create a clinic to help do that. So I think he represents the best of the Kennedy family tradition. And I mean, as a kid, I was a huge fan of his father. So that sort of baked into the cake. But but what he did is he just followed the evidence where it took him as a lawyer. Maybe not fully realizing what would happen when he went into truly this area where you're not allowed any heresy. But why do we have a system of drugs where you're not allowed to have informed consent before it's forced upon someone, where you're not allowed to have a jury trial determine whether what they did was right, and where you're not allowed to have a public trial to decide it? When I see those three things, that makes me raise questions, not make me say, oh, this must be a magical drug, that if I put a word on it, like vaccine, all of a sudden it can't ever be questioned. I don't trust a system that removes public trials, removes jury trials, and removes the core right of informed consent, which the Nuremberg Code was all about. Never again. And never again was informed consent before invasive medical treatments happen. They want to bring it back. They want to bring back they want to bring back the medical standards that we had during Nazi Germany. And so, no, I'm not in favor of that. And Robert Kennedy's been one of the loudest voices opposed to those kind of methods of determining the safety and efficacy of a drug. And just mostly it's about informed consent. Make sure people know what their risks are before they take it. And if somebody does something wrong on the corporate side, they should be held responsible in a public jury trial like everybody else.
Well, so first of all, I think multiple people have said this now. It's 44 million who have been vaccinated, not 44,000. So nobody accuses you of misinformation.
Oh, I thought I said 44 million.
Okay, no, not good. So, second thing, what was I about to say? Oh, I forgot. It was about informed consent. Oh no, it. Wow, I just had it and it fell out of my head again. Doesn't matter. It'll come back. So
but Civil Action, great book, great movie, teaches you how tough those cases are. If you're a hero of those kind of cases, whatever you think about the Kennedys from your political perspective, Bobby Kennedy has been that lawyer times 10. And has had an extraordinary and exceptional record in that field. Obviously, we don't agree on a wide range of political issues, but he has been a noble advocate and used the law for the best reasons a lot throughout his entire life, and has taken a lot of political risks to do so. And what he's doing here is just standing up for people's informed consent. Make sure, and that's what they're suppressing. They're saying no informed consent. That's what they don't want. That's what big tech doesn't want. That's what some government operators don't want. And that goes to the core of the Nuremberg Code. And if we're going to take serious the doctrine of never again, there's nothing more important than making sure informed consent stays in our medical procedures throughout the country and the world.
Well, and it's the discussion we had with Dershowitz during the debate is where ultimately people don't really appreciate the full immunity that goes on behind for these companies manufacturing the vaccines, which is an interesting. I mean, it's just an interesting anomaly. How on earth would you want to give full immunity? And now I remembered my thought. My thought was that it's also very interesting from one side, from the same side that actually wants to hold manufacturers of firearms liable for that, the results of those firearms, doesn't want to hold the manufacturers. It doesn't want to allow people to hold the manufacturers responsible for any negative consequences, whether it comes from accidents, poor production standards, or whatever. The idea of immunity for one manufacturer while seeking the responsibility of a separate manufacturer, it again just reeks of politics ruining everything. Which whatever. And now I guess it's a good segue also, the comparisons to the Nuremberg and the bad comparisons getting people into trouble. Gina Carano. We have no more on Robert Kennedy. Like, we don't know what's.
No, I think he will. He's not going to take this lying down. He's been a very smart legal advocate his whole life in his career. I have no doubt he will take remedial corrective action, and he'll have a broad range of support across the ideological and political spectrum. And I think the template of those kind of claims will be able to use in other cases that I'm going to be bringing in other cases for other people. So it'll be fun to watch and witness, and I hope he helps bring corrective remedy. I think there's a lot. But people forget, like Facebook, you can sue Facebook in Delaware. That's where they're incorporated. Delaware doesn't have a strong anti-SLAPP statute that's applicable. So, like, that's where they haven't thought through some of these things, I don't think. Not like they thought through the other stuff. They thought through how they could get away with suppression and censorship. They had not thought through how they can get away with libel, I don't think. And we'll see if it's somebody like Bobby Kennedy, who, again, just citing government sources and data, that's what they said was somehow false representations while lying about claiming they have third-party fact checkers. They don't. None of them are third-party. And I don't have any reason. They've produced no evidence publicly that any actual fact check occurred, any actual public health expert agreement occurred, and indeed there are public health experts who disagree with Facebook on this particular issue. So I think it'll be a very promising potential case and something to really, really watch. As important, maybe more important than Candace Owens' suit against involving the third-party fact checkers. Yeah,
like Candace Owens' suit has a lot of novel arguments, but it also has a few that have already been made that haven't been well received. Before we get into the next subject, Gina Carano, everybody, I'm being told there's 12,700 people watching and only 2.6 thousand thumbs up. Stir the algorithm, give it a thumbs up, drop a comment, and also, I'm not saying this to try to drive revenue to my second channel. In the event that something happens with this channel, sub to Viva family. At the very least, I'll have a place to make emergency announcements if I need to. But I think we've covered we've covered ourselves here. Like, I say that, but who knows what happens. So anyways, Viva Random, if you want to just have a way for me to connect, and check us out on Locals, because that's the place where we have freedom to some extent.
Well, and the Viva family is just great anyway. You see all the cute kids, you see all the fun stuff, you see, get some cooking, practical advice. But I just find it serene and relaxing. When I just want to chill, I just go through some of your old videos. They're great. The little ones are great. They're adorable. It's just it's very refreshing to see good people acting in a good way, and it especially when you deal with the insanity of our current legal and political environment.
It's amazing. And my breakfast video from last week got demonetized, which I'm sure they're going to review it. But if you could believe it, I went out for breakfast during lockdown.
Oh, right. Of course. That's why.
It's madness.
Even though it was legal where you did it.
No. I think it's just because the head. There's a word in that video that YouTube picks up on. It's boom. Anyways, so manual review, whatever. But so thumbs up this video. Now let's get into Gina Carano. Everybody doesn't know Gina Carano made what I call a dangerous comparison, a dangerous analogy. Not in the sense that people take the word danger literally. Not in the sense that she was advocating anything dangerous in it. Dangerous in the sense that the world we're living in. The dark forces are going to seize any opportunity to weaponize. And so when you make dangerous comparisons, you're giving someone the opportunity to weaponize them against you. That's exactly how I meant it. The Instagram post, talked about the historical context in which the Second World War occurred. I'm paraphrasing and wording it properly. And it wasn't even clear which side of the political spectrum she was analogizing it to. It could. There's arguments that it could apply to both sides. But the bottom line, you make analogies of current events, or even try to imply analogies of current events to historical atrocities. You're going to get people pissed. And if you're on the wrong side of the political spectrum, it's a dangerous post because someone's going to weaponize it against you, and they did. So she lost her gig at The Mandalorian with Disney. And now she's apparently signed some agreement with Ben Shapiro of the Daily Wire to do a production with them. All the better, but it better be good, because if it's bad, Disney's going to have a good laugh. But this is the question. Everyone's like, sue. There's no suit, right? It doesn't matter, whether or not someone else at Disney, that the guy Perez did something worse. She's got no suit. These contracts have morality clauses. They don't have to exercise them with any consistency. Do you see any basis for any potential suit?
Yes, because it's California. So in California, Labor Code 1101, 1102 precludes employers from leveraging their employment power to dictate any set of political beliefs or activities. That's where Disney could be in trouble. And you have a private right for a cause of action for damages established, I think, back in 1946, where they said that if, in fact, you have been terminated because the employer wanted to create sort of a politically a set of beliefs that were common across its employees, or just leveraging politics at all, basically is illegal. So while political activity is not a protected class for discrimination purposes under California law, it's protected in a separate area that goes all the way back to the 30s, that was meant to prevent employers from using the employment leverage to dictate political beliefs. And to some degree, there's probably good reason to believe that's what took place here. So she may have a claim if she wants to pursue it on those grounds. The second part of it is the backstory. This is really an internal struggle at Disney and Lucasfilms between the utter disaster that is known as Kathleen Kennedy, who's managed to damage a brand that people thought could not be damaged, the Star Wars brand, and the director of The Mandalorian, Jon Favreau. Jon Favreau's an old school guy. He's a big fan he's the one who put Gina in, had her scripted for the next season. And there's plenty of stories that he's enraged at what happened, and that George Lucas is enraged at what happened. The whole backstory is The Mandalorian brought back Luke Skywalker. For anyone who didn't see it, you just got spoiled. Sorry. They brought him back at the last episode of the last season.
This will get you into trouble on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. I used to I had a friend of mine who was talking about movies, and I mentioned something, and I spoiled it right there for him. Used to do it by accident all the time. But whereas Kathleen Kennedy was trying to do this whole woke thing, eliminate Luke Skywalker, make the whole hero just a woman, and all this jazz, that really upset a lot of the fan base, and she was enraged at Favreau for what he did in Mandalorian. And there's even been talk that they may retcon the Disney trilogy. They may pretend that trilogy doesn't exist and come back with a whole new one because of what a disaster it was financially for Disney and how much damage they did. It turns out woke is not popular. Go woke, get broke. And so that's the other backstory that's happening here. And that's why she still may end up getting reemployed. It would not surprise me. This is an internal struggle where Kathleen Kennedy's trying to shove out Jon Favreau, and Jon Favreau, a lot of people that support him are trying to shove out Kathleen Kennedy, because Lucasfilms may not have a future if they keep going down this path. Disney did severe damage to their brand, and they're already getting hammered in the lockdown because everything's shut down at the resort centers and the movie theaters. So and I have no doubt here was where people took power in their own hands. A lot of people started canceling their Disney Plus subscription just to make a protest. And if anywhere near the numbers as appear to be the case were there, they lost a lot more money than they gained by making this action. Because because her statement was politically an innocuous statement, my view. I get that there's certain subjects that are considered automatically taboo, but there it's very selective, as everybody's pointing out. Pascal's made the same comparison, etc.
Oh no, Perez's comparison was direct. This was and by the way, I'm not trying to. I pulled up a couple of comments that I'm getting the history wrong. I'm not making any statements about her post. I don't want to mischaracterize it. I also don't want to feign outrage. It was describing the social context that led to that preceded the wars. It's what it is. And she did. There were no overt comparisons, like Orange Man is Mustache Man and Orange Man followers or Mustache Man followers. It was what it is. But you just know that people are going to react this way because they can.
Well, and she'd been very aggressive political. She comes from the MMA world. She's conservative. I think she's known this was coming, but she's decided not to stay silent related to it. And she was one of the most popular characters on that Disney show. But for the backstory, I don't think they take this action. Jon Favreau never takes this action. And it's a sign that Disney is still completely out of touch. It's fascinating how distant they are from Walt Disney, the founder, because he was a bit of a crazy, actually, but on the right wing side. I mean, it's amazing where they're going. Bob Iger, who's the longtime ex-CEO of Disney, fancies himself a future president. So that's an important backdrop, too. So there's a lot of dynamics in play here. Financially, culturally, and politically. But if she wants, she can likely sue, because my guess is she would be able to prove, given this backdrop, that their determination was meant to send a political message about political conformity of anyone they have a contract with, and the morals clause wouldn't override that, because they're not legally allowed in California to include anything in a morals clause that relates to politics, because that would itself be a violation of the labor code. So if she wants to sue, Gina can sue. So be happy to see her sue. That'd be great fun.
All right,
and all of it. And there's a lot of the geeks and gamers and all the rest, Nerdrotic, Doomcock, all the popular cultural commentators on YouTube that come from the anti-woke side of the equation. Well, I'm sure I'll love to see it too.
Well, it's very funny. I saw a comment that said, "I bet Robert Barnes likes Doomcock," and I didn't know what Doomcock was.
I do. He's great.
I didn't want to get canceled for saying something I'm not supposed to say. But
he's the future ruler of the universe, as he would tell you. So it's fun for people. It's just good social, cultural commentary. They really sort of stay up with that. Nerdrotic was a comic book owner for a long time in San Francisco, had to move out of there because of all the craziness. But, and what's interesting is all these guys 5 years ago, you would have identified with the political left, probably. Same with the Geeks and Gamers guy, maybe not, hugely popular YouTube channel. Analyzes literally geeks and games. I mean, that's what they do. And it's fascinating. But it's this attempt to culturally leverage Hollywood to have the same conformist ideas that big tech is trying to do. So they're trying to do to her what Facebook is trying to do to Bobby Kennedy. It's anybody who sticks their head up with any heretical view has to be burned at the stake quickly. It's a sad, but a lot of this still is illegal. Libel by Facebook against Bobby Kennedy is still illegal. Section 230 is not an immunity for that. Nor is there, and in many states, you cannot be sued for political discrimination. But in California, if it's done in a certain way, you can.
Very interesting. 51 minutes, people. If anybody wants to know the 1 minute highlight, to tweet out to Gina Carano. Maybe she'll give Barnes a call. Okay, so that's Gina. It's whatever. It's the world we're living in right now, where people have to walk on eggshells, and not like there are lines that exist in any time. but this is not a line that was crossed that should result in the sanction that was imposed.
Politically selective line. The real line is, if you're conservative, you're not allowed to make certain comparisons. To the left, you can do it whenever you want, unless you're Bobby Kennedy and you're questioning the great Bill Gates, or you're questioning whether everything is exactly what they're saying it is as it relates to certain drugs.
No, that's it. And the other thing is, like, we used to live in a time where I don't like World War II slavery. I don't like atrocity analogies just because you don't need the analogy to make your point. But it used to be, it would cost you an argument. It wouldn't cost you your job, and it wouldn't cost you a contract, and it wouldn't cost you social media ostracizing and threats and whatever. Someone says, God, I'm going to have to go see who Doomcock is now. I love Doomcock. Famous, respected lawyers. Robert Barnes, what a time to be alive. All right, well, let's get into the serious stuff here. Going from Doomcock to Trump's second impeachment. Let's go over this. Okay, so I've been following it en diagonal, as we say. I cannot stomach it. I couldn't stomach watching it. Watching these people, feigning emotional responses to these things and trying to jerk at people's most basic primordial reactions. I can't stand it. It's politics and it's law, and when they meet, it's like the intersections of vomit and diarrhea meeting. So I've been watching it a bit. I did it yesterday, just a follow-up video when they said they were going to announce witnesses. And then by the time I published that video, they said they were not announcing witnesses and he was acquitted. What happened? First of all, the first question is this. Can you have a constitutional impeachment that does not respect certain constitutional protections, like due process? Can you have it, which is the argument that it's a purely political process, so it doesn't need to respect any constitutionally protected rights and protections?
That's never made sense to me. I mean, those are people arguing from power rather than arguing for what's right. Just because the politicians, that generally the court system and other people won't challenge or contest what they do, doesn't mean they're right. Otherwise, that means any political action has no constitutional limitation ever. That doesn't make any sense. Why do we have a constitution then? So the Constitution clearly applies. The argument that because it's impeachment, magically it's exempt, never made any sense. It's not an argument they have made until this impeachment that I've ever seen. And it was sort of sad to see it be made, the perilous precedent now being set by the political class, willing to weaponize anything and everything, and don't care about restraints or restrictions, and only look to the ends, don't care about whether their means are more harmful to any ends that could be achieved in the context. So it was clear. I mean, it was all a violation. Now, they got to. Now, here's my view. My view is that every single impeachment vote should be 2/3 vote. That's what the Constitution. While the Constitution references conviction, to me, because everything's about conviction, everything should be a 2/3 vote, including what evidence is presented, what witnesses are heard, whether or not it meets jurisdictional requirements, whether or not First Amendment applies, whether or not due process applies. The Senate has chosen not to enforce that because it's inconvenient. And well, not just because it's inconvenient, it's because the Senate has almost always been controlled by the party that's in favor of the impeachment. And that's the other part of the problem. McConnell could have set a better precedent in the last impeachment by saying everything's got to be by 2/3 vote. So that's one issue there.
But sorry to stop you there. Actually, he could have said it then, but the Senate makes the rules every time. So in theory, they can make any rules they want, regardless of what precedent they've set, and regardless of whether or not they respect the very Constitution they're purportedly enforcing.
Yes, I mean, if there was any doubt that the Senate that politicians cannot be trusted to uphold the Constitution, they completely dispatched that because they had their constitutional law professor turned congressman make all those arguments. I mean, there's a guy who really put the con in con law. I mean, dear Raskin. So for him to come forward and say no constitutional restraints of any kind, that was problem one. Problem two, of course, is they didn't have jurisdiction. It was a bill of attainder. It did violate the First Amendment. It did violate the Fifth Amendment. But they obviously didn't care about any of it. Their excuse was no constitutional application. The second argument, it didn't fit the definition of any crime. This time, they didn't even claim it fit the definition of any crime.
Well, in fairness, they did allude to inciting an insurrection, which in theory is criminal in nature. So at the very least, they listened to Alan Dershowitz's pleading from the first time around. But
there's a specific D.C. statute, and they didn't rely upon that statute because they knew they couldn't meet it. So there's a specific D.C. statute that's applicable for Trump, and it clearly doesn't meet the statute. doesn't meet the First Amendment standards either that statute is limited by. So that was the second problem, of course, but they just moved past that because they decided not to have 2/3 votes on any of these issues. If we use 2/3 votes as the standards, they didn't have jurisdiction. It did violate the First Amendment, did violate the Fifth Amendment. It didn't fit the definition of a crime because they never got 2/3 votes on their favor on any of those. They just got majority votes. And so that's my interpretation of anything that's called precedential from the Senate as it relates to impeachment going forward. But the other part, of course, is, as you know, it's the old lawyer statement. When you're right on the facts, you pound the facts. When you're right on the law, you pound the law. When you're wrong on both, you pound the table. And Raskin and the House members did a lot of table pounding. They did a lot of emotional appeals. The other aspect of this was you have a judge presiding over the case who's not the constitutionally appointed officer, who's also serving as a juror, who's also potentially a witness, who's conflicted at every level possible. I saw all these liberal lawyers whining about when Republicans left the chamber, saying no juror would ever do this in a real criminal trial. Nothing about this was a real criminal trial. It was a mockery of a trial. It was an embarrassment. Any lawyer who calls that a trial should give up their law license today because that was a disgrace. Nothing about it reflected a trial.
Two things. Someone I brought up the question and asked, what of the fact that John Roberts did not preside, and someone else, King Takura, I can't remember the name now, said, it was moot because he left office. Now, one thing I didn't actually fully appreciate until people commented on my video is, every example they've been using was of someone who resigned before the trial. Those are the only two examples I think that occurred where, someone was impeached while in office, resigned before getting punished and before having a trial to avoid the punishment. This was not even that case. This was even one step above or below. I don't know which way you want to do it, but the people had voted in theory, so resolved the problem itself, but it was not as though any action, it's not as though Trump removed himself from office to avoid punishment. It was just by course, which made it extra super duper moot to try to have the trial on someone who no longer held office, but not even as a result of having resigned to avoid punishment.
And the problem is, it says any trial of it only talks about the president, not a president. And they actually had contradictory arguments. They said the president meant the president when it came to having the Chief Justice preside, but the president meant a president when it came to having a trial of someone who no longer was president. I mean, the exact same language, directly conflicting interpretations of the same document by the same group of Democratic House managers. But going past that, almost everything they introduced was all inadmissible. I mean, in a real trial, you can't. Well, this goes back to the deposition analysis you did of Alex Jones. What you cannot do in a real trial is put together a bunch of your own edited clips and admit it into evidence, especially clips that are like double hearsay or triple hearsay that would never be, that are prejudicial, that are immaterial to the trial. I mean, almost every evidentiary rule that you have, the Democratic House managers managed to violate.
Yeah, not just that. It kills me that I forgot to mention it in the video. The not fake. They were what's the word? Doctored. You want to talk about doctored? Trump's face on Stallone's body is not doctored. That's humor, and if you don't get it, there's a problem. Doctored is adding a blue check mark to lend credibility to that which did not have a blue check mark, and that's not to say that the tweet would be any less impactful. But so for those of you who don't know, they were showing tweets, and it was Trump retweeting one of his aides. I forget who retweeted the tweet. They added a blue check mark to the tweet. The person is not blue check mark verified on Twitter, and they said, I've never been verified. How did my tweet before the Senate have a blue check mark when I'm not verified? And then apparently the impeachment team said, we made a mistake. That's not a mistake. That, as far as I am concerned, is falsifying evidence. So that's not a mistake. You don't accidentally doctor a tweet by adding a blue check mark to make it look like a verified account when it's not. That's not a mistake. And that blows my mind.
And that wasn't the only one. They also changed the dates on different tweets. They got caught because they let the New York Times take photos of them that showed that it was a different date than the date that they were putting up. Third, they got caught lying about what Senator Mike Lee had said, tried to falsify his testimony into the record. Unfortunately, he was a senator, so he was like, I didn't say that. Quit lying about me in a trial in which I'm a juror. So they had to correct that. They doctored some aspects of they obviously did incredible manipulation of the videos. So they presented a video that appeared to be Trump talking to people while they were rioting. which didn't happen. So, I mean, they changed the timeline, changed the sequence, changed the location. So they manipulated evidence, doctored evidence, fabricated evidence, made up evidence, manipulated evidence, all things you couldn't do in the first place, while introducing it as evidence when it was not admissible under any traditional rule of evidence, when it was immaterial, not pertinent to any relevant matter before the Senate, and often unfairly prejudicial, which is also ought to be excluded under the evidentiary rules. So you go through the key evidentiary rules, federal rules, 401, 402, 403, 404, 106, rule of completeness, rule 801 and 803. They violated them across the board. They had impermissible expert testimony. They misrepresented Professor Turley's position entirely. They used a position he had argued 30 years before, when he only argued that there might be utility to holding a trial. He didn't actually make a decision in that legal brief about whether or not it is constitutional to also adjudicate guilt. He just said you could still hold a trial, there'd be public utility to it. But he had dispatched that position quite some time ago, and he made that clear in the months leading up to this. And they pretended that he still had the position until a day or two before the trial, which is totally false.
Well, first of all, leave it to Real Bambuga to get a very good, insightful joke in here. I'm surprised Twitter didn't immediately verify her account just so she'd have a blue check mark. I mean, that with the level of collusion or the cooperation between big tech and government, it's not that far off. And
last but not least, they confused Calvary the Cross with the cavalry coming in as part of the army. And so they basically defame, but again, they get away with it because they did this on the House floor. Some people had asked whether she could sue. She can't because it's on the House floor. That they made the statement. Right now, unless I win my Covington case, no politician can be sued for anything they say ever. Unless I win my Covington case before the Supreme Court or get the law changed. But they even mischaracterized what she was saying to mischaracterize what the president did. So it was the most dishonest, dishonorable presentation I'd seen in a long time that was masqueraded and made a mockery of the trial procedures that we hold dear in America.
And for those of you who don't know, they picked a tweet where they said either bring in or bring on the Calvary, which Swalwell thought said or meant to say cavalry. And in fairness, I had no idea what cavalry was. No idea. I read it. When I saw it, I didn't even see cavalry. I saw cavalry.
Well, it's a small chance Swalwell might not have known, but somebody along that way knew. Because, anybody that's through that has any connection to the religious tradition in America knows that when it was capitalized, knows the difference of where the L and the V are. And it was extraordinary what they did, but it was just massive manipulation of evidence, for no consequence, of course. And these are a lot of the same people demanding that, say, Lynn Wood or Sidney Powell or Rudy Giuliani get disbarred just because they brought controversial claims, while they themselves did pretty much every dishonorable, sanctionable thing you could do in a trial. Democratic House managers did.
Yep. I just say the one presentation, which from a technical perspective was great, was Joe Neguse, because he put Turley in contradiction with his previous positions. When I actually paused those clips to read the excerpts, I didn't even, Neguse was sort of implying that Turley was affirming the correctness of it, where when I read it, it just sort of looked like Turley was summarizing historically what had happened.
Yes.
And in one of them where, the one statement where Turley says, no president or no man shall escape the account he owes to the laws of his country. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. I can read that one way. It doesn't mean you have a trial for impeachment once he's out of office. It means if he's out of office and a private citizen, go after him with the other laws to which he could be held to account. But they never would, because there was never anything that it would even rise to the level of remote probable cause to go after him for.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a sham from beginning to end. I know the president lawyers could have presented a lot more evidence. They started off terrible. That first day presentation may have been one of the worst presentations I've ever witnessed. I don't know what. I'll give Dershowitz credit. They're asking. I mean, Dershowitz was just honest. They're like, "What do you think about this?" He's like, "I have no idea what this guy's doing." He was like, I'm clueless. Well, they came back better at the end. Still not spectacular in my view, because they conceded certain issues that I wouldn't have conceded. They decided not to go into issues that I would have gone into, and they only leveraged that at the very end on the witness issue. They're like, okay, if you call one congressman, we call Nancy Pelosi, and we get into everything she knew. And all of a sudden, Democrats are like, hold on, never mind. Well, we don't need any witnesses. We'll pass that.
Actually, but You know, we're on it. No, stop it before we get to the witnesses, because I have a lot of questions on that. The well, who was it? It wasn't Schoen. It was Castor who gave the first day presentation, right?
Oh, yeah. And Schoen came up after him, and he did okay. It's just, this was a political trial. This was like the Chicago 7 trial. This was theater. This was not a legal trial. If it was a legal trial, all this ridiculousness would not have even happened. So they seem to be unprepared for that. They got better prepared by closing, and Trump's TV team, I don't think it was the lawyers that put that together. It was Trump's TV team that put together the great scripts. They were saying, well, if we want to go down memory lane and we want to call things incitement and we want to talk about how horrendous it is to contest elections. But like, here's where I would have gone. On the contesting elections part, I would have played Hillary Clinton's part about contest, fight, how she kept fighting for 4 years.
Not concede. I mean, that's
not concede. That's what she said. Don't concede. And number 2, I would have gone through the whole history. I would have named every famous congressman and senator since 1809 who had voiced objections to elections, and included Alexander Hamilton in 1796, how that was resolved by John Adams, same with Thomas Jefferson in 1800. Remind them that this has a long constitutional history, and this gaslighting mythology that questioning elections is somehow a moral horror is completely contrary to our constitutional history. So I would have gone into more detail on that. I would have detailed why. I would have put the president's reasonableness laid it out. Say, here's why he was concerned, and unfortunately the courts didn't provide an answer. And historically, Congress is the answer. But they decided to take a more narrow defense to placate the Lindsey Graham wing, and that mostly worked. But I mean, at the end of the day, they end up losing 2 more votes than they had when they started. So that gives you some sense of how much that really mattered. The reality was there wasn't going to be 67 votes. I was surprised that idiot Cassidy came out of hiding out of Louisiana. His political career has gone Louisiana fishing. You can look that up, what that means. His political career is finito. The rest of them were not a surprise because they're either retired, they're not up until 2026, or their last name is Mitt Romney. So and he comes from a family of losers. So he's just, he just inherited that loser trait.
I just want to say one thing about Castor, for anybody who's looking to be an attorney and to present in front of the court, never publicly announce that you're changing strategy in front of everybody.
Don't keep congratulating the other side. Golly, gee, that argument was so good. I don't even know what I'm going to do now.
I felt uncomfortable watching it because it really felt, and I'm not trying to be mean and there's no but, it felt like someone who had not prepared winging a presentation. And when you see
I'll put it this way, the cat lawyer did a lot better.
So listen, you announce you're changing strategy. That's an admission that things are going badly. It's something you think to yourself, but you don't say it out loud unless you're Austin Powers thawing from cryogenically frozen. The witnesses now. So what happened? Because from what I understand, the Republicans had initially said they were not going to call witnesses. They flopped. Was it a sign of weakness? Was it calling a bluff that they knew the Dems were going to backtrack on? And because that's what ended up happening. So what happened, and what did it mean beginning to end, and why did they ultimately not call witnesses?
The video presentation was so effective, and the lawyers did a better job. I just wasn't overly ecstatic, but I thought the video presentation is what was really good on the president's or on Trump's closing, and because it just so showed how absurd it was. And what they did is they returned the favor. They're like, okay, if you guys are going to edit stuff together, we'll edit stuff together. And our editing is going to look more impactful because you got a few guys breaking some windows and doors. We have people kicking people in the head while they're on the ground. We have people burning down buildings. We have people looting stores. We have older women crying about just losing their apartment, losing their house, losing their livelihood. And playing it next to all the statements Kamala Harris, now vice president, made, all the statements Joe Biden made. I mean, trying to pretend that the word fight is somehow imminent incitement of criminal activity was always laughable, but it was great that they just took, hey, let's use every time. And they put every single Democratic senator, all the different times, just of sampling, they had used the word fight. And of course, all of them had. So it made a point of how preposterous this position was. And because of that, the Democrats realized we need something to change the script to at least look a little better. And so they said, well, we'll call the congresswoman who's a Republican, but who actually beat another Republican in the top two system in the state of Washington to win. So she's kind of a quasi-Republican who voted to impeach Trump in the House and claimed she overheard a conversation or had basically it was double hearsay. It was Trump told this guy this, and this guy then told me that. And so they needed the last minute. They thought that would salvage their day. And what was smart was Trump's people came back and said, fine, there's about 200 witnesses we would like to actually look at to depose. And on top of that, we would, and if we're only going to be allowed to call one, we'll call Nancy Pelosi and get into what really happened that day about, and the days leading up to it about security and safety and due process, et cetera.
Yeah, well, that's
when all of a sudden they were like, never mind. We'll just put her statement in the record and go home.
I might at that point I might have insisted. It would have been, but I might have insisted. Let the games begin.
Oh, it was yes. I mean, my view was to go ahead and drag this theater out, and put the election on trial, put everything that happened really on January 6th on trial, put the whole history of attacking the president for 4 years on trial, all of those things. I get why Trump went with the way he went. He was promised that there wasn't 67 votes if he played ball. My view is there never was 67 votes if he had contested it. But that ship has sailed. Ultimately, he has set a record. He's the back-to-back impeachment acquittal king. The only president to be acquitted twice. And if you throw in the Mueller report, really thrice. He set a record for that. I
genuinely, knowing what I know now, and it's come from a place of nothing. So it's not like I came in with any preconceived notions. To see the impeachment process weaponized the way it was now, it might have been weaponized the first time, and I could accept that because maybe it was weaponized the same way with Bill Clinton, and I just wasn't as sensitive or awake then. But to see the way it's now, it's been turned into a joke now. Like it's been turned into an actual joke where it's just another tool. It's not just another tool in the toolbox with no sanctity, no respect for what it was. It's interesting to see. And to the comment as to someone asked how you and I met, it's a good segue. We met because back when I just first started exploring all this stuff, I dissected the deposition of AJ, Voldemort, and I think at some point we made a connection on Twitter, and I asked if I could talk to you about everything that you do, and then we started. It's amazing. But
that's right. Yeah, it was right. It was not long after the Covington case got filed.
Yep.
So it was a combination of those two stories. It's extra. Basically they've burned down every limitation on impeachment that ever existed. And the person doesn't even have to be in office anymore. Why do they even have to be alive anymore? That's about the only thing they haven't done is impeach a dead person yet.
No, I guess the issue is always going to be they will never have a similar case because the impeachment would have to be while they were in office, and then they're no longer in office. But like I said,
their view is it doesn't matter. Their view is they could impeach afterwards. Not just that they could hold the trial after office, but they could impeach after office.
I said as a joke, a cynical sort of observational joke on Twitter. It's great. Impeach if you really hate someone enough, impeach on the right before the election, especially if it's a second term, just so you can go after them politically after they're out of office. It's pure weaponizing to the detriment of the essence of the Constitution. And and for anybody who didn't see, I put it up yesterday. The highlight in my summary of the recap of the impeachment. Stacey Plaskett, also an attorney, Joe Neguzzi. They're all attorneys turned politicians. Her response to the montage was to turn it into a racial gender issue, where literally verbatim, and I didn't want to edit anymore. I wanted to cut the clip down so it was watchable. Literally saying, when they say it, it's insurrection. When we say it, when women or people of color say it, they're fighting for something. And she was proud that other senators fought up with them. She literally said fought up with them, and she was proud of it. Sure, things happened that were violent over the summer, but senators, she was brought in the Amish. She brought in senators who fought up with them. It was the most intellectually terrible response that you could have, because in the beginning they're putting Turley in contradiction with his prior statements. Well, by the end they're putting the Democrats in contradiction with their own positions, and not in any subtle way or not any walking back type way, but easy. My recollection is also it wasn't just women and people of color who were using those terms. There were a lot.
They had every single senator saying language of the same language they now said was impermissible and somehow quasi-criminal and impeachable. They had that they said language that was frankly much more aggressive and followed by much worse violence.
Yep, no question. So he has now been acquitted. The question was this that I had. There is no way that they can go back and redraft articles of impeachment, because now I see Jonathan Turley on Twitter saying, had you listened to me before, you might have gotten a conviction. Had you broken them down into individual charges? Can they remedy any of this?
Not any of this, no. But apparently if their position is they can also impeach, not just hold a trial after the person has left office, then who knows? I mean, presumably they won't be wasting more time bringing more impeachments, but no limit. They may try some 14th Amendment nonsense.
So what is that? I don't think I know.
The 14th Amendment just said basically allowed for disqualification of office if you had been previously part of a insurrection. It was a civil war meant to give them the right to later on limit Confederate generals from participating in political office. They never enforced it for very long afterwards. Nor does it give Congress the right to determine that. So, and because legally under the impeachment clause, he was just acquitted, there's no basis for it. But who knows? I mean, they're trying to find every crazy thing they can to weaponize. I mean, it's part of what's coming with HR 1 and HR 127.
Okay, so good segue. I don't even know the question to ask you. What is HR 1 and HR 27? What is it? Explain to the people who don't know what it is, why it's relevant, and why we need to know about it.
So HR 1 is their big election law reform, and they want to federalize what they just did in the 2020 election. So they want to force states to basically do mass voter registration, to do automatic voter registration, to allow same-day voter registration, to not allow states to remove people from what's commonly called dirty rolls. It was like right now, if people have moved, if you have proof of they're dead, things like that, you can remove them. They're trying to actually prohibit a lot of that by federal law. They're trying to not allow states to change election rules other than those rules, but require federal pre-clearance with the Attorney General's office before they can do so. Massive mandatory early voting in all states for 15 days up to the election. Mandatory mail-in balloting for all states. Not allow signature verification checks to occur in a meaningful manner without all these limitations. Not allow any identification check to ever occur for any for any vote cast in any manner. So they want to take the worst aspects of the election rules that Time Magazine called a cabal meant to fortify the election. Yes. And they want to really fortify the election. They want to fortify all federal elections going forward. And it's HR 1. It's their number one bill, their priority bill.
Okay. HR is House of Representatives? House Resolution. Okay, interesting. And then, so basically HR 1 is to formalize that which was only sort of, what's the word? Not piecemeal applied, but was only applied in certain states.
And it's an attempt to completely circumvent the states and state legislatures. Also to require redistricting committees that are partisan committees that are separate. They want to strip the state legislatures of all control over all federal elections. As to the presidential election, I think the law is patently unconstitutional. The Constitution does not afford Congress any such role. As to any state election, it's patently unconstitutional. It doesn't afford Congress any such role. So the only question is, what about state elections for Congress and senator? There, the way the clause is written is it first and foremost gives all power to the state legislatures in how the House member or Senate is chosen. But it does include a caveat that's pretty broad that says that Congress can change that. So the provisions as to the House and the Senate are probably constitutional, at least in that terms. There's other constitutional problems that will arise in terms of what they're trying to do. But those provisions would, as to the House and Senate members, most of them would likely be upheld as constitutional if challenged. They're also trying to prohibit who can challenge the statute and where they can challenge. You can only sue in the District of Columbia. You can only sue on these grounds. So they want to rewrite the rules so that they will never lose. And this is the bill that attempts to do so. They also want to force all kinds of disclosures. Some of those disclosures aren't bad, like they want to require paper verified ballots. That's mostly the case these days now. But things like that. They want to require more disclosure about foreign involvement in the election and who is advertising. Most of that is not bad, but there's aspects of it. You have a right of anonymous speech, and they're really trying to circumvent that ability to do anonymous speech. And in the current environment, we know who that punishes. The people who might otherwise want to stay quiet about their supporting Trump, but they're doing so in some independent expenditure without going through the campaign. Right now, they have anonymous speech rights. They want to take that away. Whether the First Amendment allows them to is an open question. They also want to help Congress members and their liberal allies. If you're running for office, you now can take donations to pay your health insurance, pay your child care bill, pay your licensing certification training, pay a whole bunch of things that have historically not been considered campaign expenses. That's a backdoor ticket to bribery is what it is. So it's a very perilous law that hopefully at least the Senate rejects, but it's up in the air. It's going to be a close vote. But I think as it applies to the presidential election, will be struck down as unconstitutional. It will be an uphill battle to get it struck down as unconstitutional on the House and Senate side.
Okay, interesting. Now, just bringing this up because I think this is a joke, but you never know in today's world.
It's not a joke. They're insistent on strict signature matches that are completely different than the ones they did for mail-in balloting during the election. Okay, so totally different standards.
This is amazing because I literally I brought it up almost as a joke because I thought it was a joke that Newsom is trying to require signature. Okay, interesting. That's phenomenally fascinating in the the intersection of diarrhea and vomiting type fascinating meeting again.
I'm going to be looking at for those people and for others springing suit, arguing that all nominating petitions, candidate petitions, recall and initiative and referendum petitions have to be governed by the same set of signature standards as absentee ballots. And you watch, they're going to be all these state officials all of a sudden will be climbing the walls. But we'll see if judges are going to be willing. Are they going to be openly hypocritical? Are they willing to tell the world we have a real signature match for referendums, petition, third parties, and recalls, and we don't really have one for absentee mail-in balloting? I just go on. I just want them to go on the record and say that they might have some difficulty doing so. So we'll see how some of that litigation turns out.
All right, and now what was HR 127?
So when they're busy taking out the First Amendment, and step 2 is to take out the Second Amendment. So HR 127 seeks to, just as HR 1 seeks to federalize all election rules that govern election to federal office, the HR 127 seeks to federalize all gun control laws. So it would require a national registry where your name is publicly available to know that you own a gun, what gun you own, how you own it. Before you could get such a gun, you would have to pass, in many cases, psychological testing. Your mental health would have to be approved by the system. They would have to make sure that you're okay to even have a gun. So they're skipping the red flag laws. There doesn't have to be a red flag anymore. Even to get a gun, it will be conditioned on you being designated by one member of the professional class that it's okay for you to have one. They want to. One other component of HR 1. They also seek to criminalize election fraud in a different context. Remember, we were talking about that New York case. The what's that guy's his meme name?
Ricky Vaughn and
Ricky Vaughn. Remember, I said there's no such law that criminalizes it. This law basically admits that because they try to criminalize exactly what that is, and it's like, why do you need a law to criminalize that if the current law already criminalizes it? If I was Ricky Vaughn's defense lawyers, I'd be citing HR 1 on motion to dismiss because this clearly shows what he did was not prohibited by federal criminal law. But they want to go past that. They want to criminalize misinformation in the election contest. I'm sure that could never get abused. So who knows where that's going to go. But HR 127 also has criminal enforcement components. They want to criminalize, they want to regulate, they want to bureaucratize, they want to put the professional class and the federal government in control over who has guns, and they want to make sure the whole world can know who has a gun, what kind of gun they own, and everything else, while also banning a whole bunch of categories of guns. They want to label certain things automatic that are just not automatic weapons if you understand guns. And I don't purport to be a gun expert. As the people in the comment section, they'll always say, you got this wrong, you got that point wrong. I'm not a gun expert by any stretch of the imagination.
I'm just saying, and I'm not venturing into it either. I just know this law sounds very similar to the state of gun ownership in Canada. Small arms, handguns are basically illegal unless you have a special license. Long arms, there's a registry. I think it's provincial and not federal. Yeah, I'm fairly certain it's provincial and not federal. But it's like, the government knows who has them, where they are, and where they can be located, and knows that it's what it is. But in Canada, basically they look at firearm ownership only as for sporting, for competition, and not at all for any of the standard Second Amendment rights reasons that we know in the States. Jay McGuire says, will HR 1 and HR 127 require 2/3 of the Senate to pass?
Nope, just majority vote in both. And so that's now maybe subject to the filibuster rule. HR 1 and HR 127 might be subject to filibuster.
And that means, for everyone who knows who Phil is, what does that mean, Robert? So that means that I understand filibuster, they can argue it until
you need 60 votes. That unless they get rid of the filibuster rule, only certain things are outside of the filibuster rule. Certain judicial appointments now can't be filibustered. Certain budget reconciliation action cannot be filibustered. But almost anything else still can, and several Democrats have said they will not back any change of that rule. So what that means is filibuster, you sit there and you literally filibuster. You take up as much time as possible. You have enough people that do it, and you can stop the bill from passing by literally just talking for days and days and days, and you prevent them from being able to vote. And so functionally it means that they need 60 plus senators for certain controversial legislation that's outside of the filibuster exemptions.
I'm going to tell Lomax Viva does not remember that, but now I'm going to have to go refresh my memory because I do remember there was an issue with that. Will Manchin honor his word on not getting rid of the filibuster so HR 1 and HR 127 can't pass?
Well, Sinema has also joined him, so they need both of them to change the filibuster rule. I don't think they will. Okay. So I think that's the best argument. Now, HR 127, I think a lot of its provisions violate the Second Amendment. The ability to ban entire categories. I mean, that's what we talked about. There's a case going up through the federal courts that has already ruled that California attempts to do just a portion of what HR 127 does violate the Second Amendment. My view is it clearly violates the Second Amendment because it attempts to limit your ability for self-defense. Not the registry part they can probably get away with constitutionally, but requiring any precondition to get access to a gun based on something like a pre-clearance with a psychological test and paying a big registration licensing fee, regardless of resources, banning complete areas of guns and ammunition. Those things I do think are unconstitutional. But it's one of the bills they're pushing early heavy, along with what they're likely to add to it. What Biden has talked about, what you were referencing, is the removing all immunity from gun manufacturers to effectively bankrupt gun manufacturers by allowing them to be sued in liberal jurisdictions for the use of their gun. The reason they did that way back was because of concern over political manipulation of venues to hold gun manufacturers responsible in ways that we do not hold car manufacturers, for example, or knife manufacturers, as an example. So if they do so, that you probably won't have a gun manufacturer in the United States, and it'll create all kinds of other parallel issues. I mean, it's not going to stop all efforts at gun. I mean, some of the countries that have the highest rate of gun violence have the highest level of gun control. There's just no correlation anyone's ever been able to find. Even liberals have come to that conclusion when they've looked at the data. The liberal data nerds are like, there's just isn't evidence that gun control works. It just creates huge black markets. It's sort of the Gang Empowerment Act is really what it is. So the Cartel Empowerment Act. And, there's some people that say Democrats are, they don't necessarily mind that. But I think it's both present serious constitutional questions, and people's concerns about both statutes are very well-founded.
Oh, someone else says, first of all, I pulled up two comments that says Canada doesn't have a registry. I'll stop talking about it because I'm not sure. I took the course last year, and I'm fairly certain that if you buy it, if you buy anything, even a hunting rifle, the government knows you have it and which one you have and where it technically should be stored. Not where it should be stored, but rather who has it and where you live. This is another interesting thing because this is what they said to us in the course is public national database of every kind of gun you own, exactly where they are. Anyone can access. Big green light for thieves. Too common sense for Congress or for politicians. So with HR 1, a politician who makes a campaign promise and then doesn't keep it, can they be retroactively prosecuted for misinformation?
No, there's plenty of exemptions in the law to recover that. Theoretically, the law appears to only target information that concerns the time and date of voter registration. It's interesting. It's three things. The stuff that's the Ricky Vaughn allegations, where you vote, when you vote. Then there's the category of whether you're qualified to vote. But the third category is interesting. They're going to criminalize anybody claiming somebody endorsed somebody who didn't. Can you imagine that's their big obsession? They want to make it a crime that, oh, no, I didn't endorse so-and-so, or so-and-so didn't endorse George. I mean, come on. So it's not a wise use of legislative resources, in my view.
Rick Henwood says, one of the questions to the House managers was, given the precedent, could Congress, under pressure from the public chanting lock her up, impeach a former Secretary of State? Best question of the day.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Republicans should probably return the favor if they get back in control. Just to remind people what a perilous precedent this was in the first place. You have to reciprocate, or otherwise they keep going unabated.
All right. What do we talk about? We might cut this one a little early so that I will go with the missus and have a romantic glass of...
I think there were two other primary topics. One was the Convention of States.
Oh, it's a different thing. I don't even know where to start with it. What is the convention? Is this the idea? Is this the idea that certain states basically secede?
No, it's under Article 5. There's two ways to amend the Constitution. One is through Congress. That has to require 2/3 of the House and the Senate, and then sends to the states and 2/3 of the states. The other that completely skips Congress, and that is if the states themselves decide to hold a convention, they can amend the Constitution if they then ratify any amendments passed by that convention. It requires 2/3 of the states to form a convention, and then there's a higher number of states that have to approve. It requires 3/4 of the states to approve. What people don't know is this project's been going on for almost 10 years, and they already have a large number of states who've already agreed to a convention. They're actually, I think, only 7 or 8 states away. Now, the hard part is to get it passed. Any amendment that they recommend actually pass requires 38 states. But their theory is they could propose the kind of universally popular provisions that may actually work and so forth. So we'll see. But so yes, it does. It is constitutional to go through that process. There are a large number of states who've already joined it. It always has risk, because you can't control the original articles of that we had, the Articles of Confederation. Well, what was it? I'm blanking momentarily. But that led to the first Constitutional Convention was supposed to be about amending that document. They didn't. They created a whole new document. So that's what I've always told people. With any of these conventions, there's always risk. It goes off the rails in ways you don't want it to. So that's the risk. But there is the possibility of doing so. And there's more people that are inclined to, because they think they're more likely to get 2/3 of the states to sign on and 3/4 of the states to ratify than they ever are to get 2/3 of Congress to agree to some of these provisions, including things like term limits, for example. So it's and clarity in other areas. So that's where they're looking at the possibility of expanding. So it is constitutional what's taking place. It is more realistic than some people have thought. The risk you have to watch out for is making sure it doesn't go off the rails at that convention. But the protection is you have to have 3/4 of the states agree. And that can be either this legislative branch approve, or Congress can actually designate this. It can be by convention within the states. So the states can form their own conventions and ratify the prior convention at such a convention. So so that's how it can happen. And it's more achievable. It's less of a pipe dream than it seems when you first hear about it.
Okay, if anyone has any more questions on that, let me know, because I don't even have a question to ask on that. But someone did bring up the one that I do have questions on: Kyle Rittenhouse and the developments from last week. So you're not, if I may ask, and if you're not allowed to say, you're not formally on the criminal defense team as in attorney of record, but you're able to say that you're involved to some extent, or are you?
Yes. Well, yeah, I've been hired, and I'm basically replacing John Pierce at this point. So representing him in the court of public opinion, may make a formal appearance in the criminal case at some point. will handle any civil cases that come up. So I'm involved in the criminal defense. Just haven't made an appearance at this point, and not clear if that becomes necessary or not. So the Mark Richards is handling the criminal case at this point, is the lawyer of record. Once I make an appearance, there are certain limitations that come with that. Until I make an appearance, there are certain limitations that are not present.
Okay. So let's start with the question number one. My understanding is he is now in sorry, which state is he in now that he got released from?
So it's in Wisconsin. Well, what's extraordinary is it's kind of like what the impeachment was like. The degree of gaslighting the prosecutor is attempting is amazing. Like, you really look at an honorable, honest prosecutor, and 90% or more of prosecutors across the country would not have brought the charges this prosecutor brought. So I was always curious, why is he bringing these charges when almost no one else would, looking at the facts that all of us can see? It's because he's committed to gaslighting the world about what happened in Kenosha. That the narrative the media is trying to spread is a narrative of there are these nice, peaceful protesters in Kenosha that this terrible people came and disrupted from the right. It's like, what in the world what world are you living in? So in their world, nobody looted, apparently. Nobody really committed arson. Almost everybody causing violence in Kenosha in the name of quote unquote protesting was doing so illegally and was from outside of Kenosha. It's extraordinary the degree to which they're trying to gaslight people by using the Kyle Rittenhouse case to build a fake narrative about what happened, similar to where they're almost shocked that anybody talked about the violence in the impeachment proceedings, as if the summer of violence didn't occur, that the only violence that's ever happened was what happened on Capitol Hill. There was no violence during the summer by BLM. There was no violence by, what are you talking about? I mean, they live in their own intense echo chamber that they're trying to even intensify further. So that's the bigger backstory. The second thing is, so when Kyle was initially at his first bail hearing, prior to that bail hearing, his lawyer advised the prosecutor that what the prosecutor knew or should have known, which is that Kyle's been subject to an extraordinary range of personal threats to assault him, threats to hurt him, threats to kill him, threats to rape him, you name it.
And sort of clear, these are not that there's serious threats and not serious threats. There are some that are more internet, Twitter type threats, just people mouthing off. These are probably more what most people would consider to be realistic and actually motivated threats.
It has an imminent nexus because of the people's ability to do so. Like, when you look at true threats jurisdiction, you're looking at how committed is this person to doing this? How expressly illicit is it? How capable are they of actually doing so, temporally, geographically, and otherwise? And here, given the volume of threats, where the threats were coming from, who was making those threats, if he got jailed, there was a high likelihood of him potentially even being killed. And if his address was known, there was a high likelihood of that occurred. Well, how did the prosecutor handle it? The prosecutor handled it by using that information not to say, well, you know what, we should come up with a different solution on bail. Instead, the prosecutor used it to try to get his bail as high as possible so he could jail Kyle. That shows you how dishonorable, dishonest, and corrupt this prosecutor is.
But just explain it in a way that anyone can understand. They were not in a way that the people who think that this might be warranted can understand, because the prosecutor was insisting that his public address be disclosed.
That's the second stage.
Okay,
so
sorry.
Stage one is he finds this out at the first bail hearing. He uses that to demand a $2 million bail, likely hoping that Kyle, coming from a poor family, would be unable to post that bail, though he knew the likely consequence of it could be the death of Kyle Rittenhouse, or at least assaults and hurts in jail. So then what happens is the months pass. A couple of months later, he decides to try to amend bail again. Again, what he's doing is he's using the bail proceedings to contaminate the court of public opinion, to gaslight Kenosha and the country about what took place there. And he has them in photographs with other people he didn't even know, misrepresents what took place. They still, and they said the OK sign was a white supremacist sign, a blatant lie, but the prosecutor knows he can get away with it because he's filing it in court, and he knows the media will be glad to run with it because they want to build the same fake news story. That's the second time he misuses bail, but it won't be the last. Now came the third time. So last week, or thereabouts. He files a bail motion, which says he's shocked. He doesn't know where Kyle Rittenhouse is. He had no idea that Kyle Rittenhouse was at an undisclosed location. It's all news to him. Total lies. The prosecutor is a liar and a fraud. He's unethical. He's dishonorable and dishonest. So that's what he does. Here's a little problem for the prosecutor. There's video of him telling the prior judge that he knew Kyle was going to be an undisclosed location for his security and safety, but using that fact to try to increase Kyle's bail at that time. So for him to say he had no idea that Kyle was in an undisclosed was a complete lie. But they run with it. The media ran with all these stories. Kyle missing, Kyle gone rogue, Kyle lost, Kyle breaks bail. All lies, all lies. And the prosecutor knows they're lies. So he gets in front of the judge, and his mistake, the prosecutor's mistake was, this is a no-nonsense, old-school Wisconsin judge. He's not a defense-friendly judge. He's an ex-prosecutor. But he's a judge who takes his oath seriously. He's not going to hear any nonsense. He's not going to violate rules because it might be popular with some part of the press or the public. And he just goes through. He goes, look, you knew this all along. There's no requirement he be at a physically located presence. Most people on bail are not at the place that is their address. Many people change addresses while they're out on bail, and many of them don't disclose it. I've never revoked bail or increased bail ever. And then he said there is a serious concern about this kid's safety, and he doesn't want any more riotous conflicts taking place. The prosecutor admits in this proceeding that people have been harassing the prior neighbors of Kyle, looking for Kyle at his prior home. To give you an idea of how imminent this threat is. As soon as it was announced that I would be representing Kyle Rittenhouse, I got threats to Kyle sent directly to me to people. That's what's going on. And why this prosecutor wants Kyle Rittenhouse hurt or dead is an open question, but that's what his behavior points to.
It is. He effectively wants him doxxed. I mean, I don't understand how. I understand how he's doing it. I don't understand how anybody can even contemplate the idea. Like, what does the judge? How does the judge react to this, especially given what you say is the prosecutor's knowledge of why they asked for such high bail in the first place? How does the judge react?
The prosecutor forgot he put that on the record before, and he admitted it implicitly when he said that, hey, by the way, these other people are his neighbors in Antioch, where he used to live, are getting harassed. Well, why are they getting harassed? Because people looking for Kyle and not for good purposes. And so he knows this, but he demanded that to dox Kyle's name and a location. Previously, the defense lawyer had asked him, here, we'll give everybody, you, the law enforcement, everybody his address, as long as we can put it under seal. Prosecutor refused. Prosecutor claimed there was a public right to know where Kyle is. Completely false. Not only this dishonorable, dishonest prosecutor claimed that bail was not a constitutional right, claimed it was a privilege. These are some of the most morally offensive, constitutionally offensive conduct I've seen from a prosecutor in my life. This guy is at the bottom of the gutter when it comes to ethics and constitutional concern. But his only mistake was that an honorable, honest judge was not going to give in to that. And that's why what the judge said is, not only did the judge correctly, he said, look, we've had too much violence already. There's the courthouse in Kenosha still hasn't been fixed from what the rioters and looters did in the name of Jacob Blake. They weren't really there for Jacob Blake. A lot of them were criminals with criminal history who came down there to terrorize the town of Kenosha. And Kyle just got caught in the middle of trying to defend and protect the people of Kenosha and the property of Kenosha and his friends in Kenosha. And this lying prosecutor thinks he can get away with weaponizing the bail process and abusing and misusing that process to such an extreme degree that even I've never witnessed, and I've witnessed some crazy things in my life. So the judge refused to increase the bail, refused to revoke the bail, refused to publicly disclose his address, and recognizing this prosecutor could not be trusted. He didn't put it this way, but this is my implicit interpretation. Refused to allow the prosecutor to know where Kyle was. He said law enforcement can know, I as a court can know, but we're done with the prosecutor knowing, because quite rightly, the prosecutor cannot be trusted. That does not require Matlock sleuthing to actually deduce. That's an insult to the prosecutor, in that he suspects he would leak the information, and the media might run with a story that inadvertently discloses where he might be. That's fascinating. So, what happens next now, I guess? So the prosecutor threatened to issue a felony bail warrant a felony bail jumping warrant, which would be ludicrous. There's no basis for that whatsoever. One, it'd be another attempt to use the bail process to contaminate the court of public opinion against Kyle, to continue this gaslighting narrative that it wasn't the outsiders that came to terrorize people that day that were the problem, but somehow a little kid just trying to do what he could to defend himself and the people around him. And so he may continue to do that. So we'll see. I mean, this clearly is a prosecutor who knows no ethical limits of any kind. And so it's going to be a real legal battle. It's going to be a battle in the court of public opinion. There's tons of people who believe false things now about Kyle, that think Kyle has no association with white supremacists. Kyle has no association with militia people. Kyle has no association with any of that. He has got no criminal history of any seriousness, period. He's just a poor kid from a poor family. They thought they could railroad, and they're still seeking to railroad and legally lynch if they can get away with it. And so it's going to be a real legal political battle to protect him and to make sure the law is done. The good thing is you have an honorable, honest, conscientious judge who takes his oath to the Constitution seriously and isn't going to put up with any nonsense. He's an old school kind of Wisconsin judge. I've known many of them. They're not people to mess around with. I would never do what this prosecutor did, which is basically lie to him. But I think that that does suggest some hope for a fair and honest trial with a fair and impartial jury, which I believe without doubt will find him not guilty of all charges, because what anybody who's witnessed the tape, I've had a lot of friends on the legal side of the left that have actually watched the tape. The key of the people that believe crazy things about him, they've never watched the tape.
Well, they've not only that, but they've never read the New York Times article. Now, I'm just going to have to be careful for 1 second because we have one dog who's not good, and I don't want. You want to take him upstairs? You want to say hi? Okay, you go away. Tom Viller says, I watched this hearing and the judge was great.
He's just a no nonsense guy. He's not going to give you a lot of friendly rulings, but he's not going to tolerate any gibberish. And if you're right on the law and the Constitution and you can persuade him, he'll go that route. Been in front of, but it's rewarding to see judges like that, because in high profile political cases, unfortunately, sometimes you don't. People can watch the Chicago 7 trial to see how that looked. It's great respect to the court as always, but it's reaffirmation for those people out there that think you can't trust the court system to ever resolve anything. Look at how this judge pushed back against all kinds of improper pressure to do the right thing. And so I have hope for the trial itself, have hope that the proceedings are going to be done. But there's a rogue prosecutor who's going to continue to try to do every crazy, corrupt thing he can to try to contaminate the trial.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that's not even something that requires. That's like trying to camouflage the obvious, where everybody on both sides knows exactly what he wants. It's just that some people might not mind it, given what they think of this kid already, and others will mind it. And you say anybody who doesn't have an opinion has never seen the videos. They've never read the New York Times article, which was pretty clear on it, which was why that it's gotten here was pretty surprising in the first place. So that's good. I mean, does it stay in front of the same judge? Is this judge going to have it until it goes to jury?
All the way through.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, what else we got? We should wind this down in a few minutes. What are the popular topics on locals? Did we miss anything? I think
most of them were along these lines. Some people were asking, could Joe Biden prohibit travel to Florida or from Florida?
Oh yeah.
My advice: just go back to look when Trump talked about this possibility and how all the lawyers on the left said, no, you can't do this. And Cuomo said he was going to sue, and everyone else, because there is a constitutional right to travel between the states. It's the reason why they can only limit voter registration for presidential elections to 30 days before. That's the latest cutoff they can have, or the earliest cutoff rather they can have, is because of the right to travel between states. So there is a right to travel between states, so that should limit and constrict what he does. But now that we're in the post-Trump era, at least for the near short term, presumably, we'll see if they try to drum up something else. I think that now the focus will be back to Biden's legislative agenda, which has a lot of big questions: HR 1, HR 127, gun control, election reform, but also the COVID bills that they're looking to pass through, where they're looking at maybe criminalizing copyright-related things in whole new ways that would disproportionately impact small creators. But also the other thing is things like these executive orders or threats of executive orders that are also problematic. So we'll see how all that unfolds. But most of the questions had that same thematic unity to them. And I'll be responding to some questions onto this live stream that's on the locals, vivabarneslaw.locals.com.
and
later tonight and tomorrow.
And every now and again, there's a super chat that I don't even know if I can address it by reading the question, if only to say we can't talk about that anymore on this platform. I brought up a few of them, so I would say bring those questions to locals, and you can bring that support would otherwise be here to locals.
And the one other question, because most of them had were on the topics we discussed, but one of the other ones was about critical race theory and treating it as a religion. The reality is the courts will never do that, even though there's a lot of practical arguments that it's being interpreted that way because they have a very limited constriction of what that is. They don't even allow people to self-define religiously quite often, quite controversially. So that's but all the critical race theory litigation will continue to develop. I'm part of the team that's looking at challenging that in the various institutions where they're trying to enforce it currently.
Okay, excellent. One question here: Can you impeach Kamala in 2 years if the House changes?
Oh, yes. I mean, there's no question. I think we may see more and more impeachments. We'll see. We'll see if this backfired in such a way that they rethink this as a strategy, or whether we've opened Pandora's box and it's Oprah with cars. Impeach you, impeachment for them, impeachment for them, impeachment for them. We may see some of that too.
All right, and I think this is definitely, you're going to say one hello. Okay, go, get out. Another hello, go, get out. Hold on, let's get this out of here. Go, get out. And then we have the missus coming down, and this is...
Go, get out.
Go. Camera right up here.
Not here.
So everybody, Robert, thank you very much. Everybody, thank you for watching. Happy Valentine's Day. I don't know how people are celebrating Valentine's Day in Quebec. It's a compromised Valentine's Day.
Looks like everybody's here celebrating Valentine's Day. You guys are lucky.
Okay, and then this might be I don't even know why we have this where this comes from. Robert, thank you very much. Everybody, thank you very much. This is turned into a podcast, which we put on a podcast on Podbean, iTunes. So Viva and Barnes Law for the People is a podcast. We're on Rumble. That's where you can get all this content for free, and we're not going to put our regular content behind paywalls.
This is a good look.
This is a good look. I like it. It makes me look like a monster, like I have a massive head. Okay, people, so that's it. So happy Valentine's Day. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Robert, stick around for 2 seconds. We'll say our proper goodbyes, but we do need, Robert, a word of encouragement before we head into a new week.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the fact that there was an acquittal of Trump is a good thing, but probably the best sign of encouragement is if you had doubts that the courts could stand up for the law, even against extraordinary political pressure by those in power, just look at what happened in Rittenhouse last week. You're talking about a poor kid from a poor family who in most circumstances would have already been railroaded. And because a court cared about the Constitution and the law more than he cared about anything else, that his rights are being protected and recognized. So there's reasons for belief and trust, despite whatever else craziness we may see and witness in the next 2021.
Okay, people, and I know this is not the look I wanted to have at the end of this, but
took the hat off.
Okay. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you soon. Robert, I'll say goodbye in 1 second.